my sense is that something, and stay with me here, something in the individuals can be paralleled in the culture. In other words, as the individuals go deeper into their own experience, acknowledge that it has some truth, even though it's a mystery, they don't know what it is, some kind of spiritual opening, some kind of expansion of the sense of self occurs, which is constructive, creative. And I think we could maybe do that in the culture. In other words, if we could just get beyond this, are they here, are they good, and we're scared of them, what are they doing, let's shoot the messenger that tells us they exist, let's deny the whole thing. And
didn't you have to do that to write the book?
Yes, I went through this too, and I think we could as a culture maybe, if we could acknowledge that maybe there are other intelligences out there. They may not take the form that we were taught in Sunday school, but maybe if we could admit there is some intelligence, that we are living in a universe that is not dead and lifeless, except on Sundays, but actually contains beings that, and spirits that all other cultures around the world know and have known, and our culture knew it until 300 years ago, that if we could admit that reality, maybe we could open to some kind of deeper experience of our own, learn to live in harmony more fully with other life forms here, and maybe some growth as a collective could take place.
Seattle nurse Cindy Lee says she encountered aliens locally right along Interstate 5. Healthcare executive Dave Jones says aliens implanted tracking devices in his body.
While all this may sound unbelievable, Harvard professor of psychiatry Dr. John Mack says these people have not lost their minds. They are just among the millions of people who've been abducted by aliens.
Hypnotherapist Sharon Philippe fits that bill. Sharon says aliens have been contacting her since she was just a tiny baby, and in fact it goes back really to infancy, doesn't it, Sharon?
That's true.
Tell us about the very first one you can recall, it, and how were you able to call it to mind later?
I have been involved, as you just said, throughout my lifetime, but I didn't really become aware of the entire issue till I had an actual UFO sighting only 25 feet away and 50 feet up off the ground when I was a teenager.
As an adult or as a teenager?
As a teenager. And that's when my recall started coming back of some unusual events that happened to me when I was a child. Originally I thought my earliest experience was when I was 3, because I remembered seeing this tall being holding my hand, and I had to ask my mom what the outfit I was wearing, how old was I, because I knew I was really little. And then I had done some work on myself and discovered that I was in a bassinet looking up at this blonde-haired woman who I've never seen before or after that in my entire life, and remember hearing the words that I will see you once again. To this day, I have no recollection of ever seeing this particular person again.
But this has affected your life, if seeing these beings when you were a child. It made you afraid of certain things, didn't it?
That's right. I was always very fearful of the dark. My mom used to have to cover the mirror at night because I used to see faces and people, I used to say, coming into my room. And so I had a very difficult time living what I would call a normal growing up life. In school, I was very quiet. I was a very introverted person. I didn't have much to do with other people. I kept to myself because I saw things that other people didn't see and was not aware of that.
So now do you think you were seeing actually beings as opposed to having a vivid imagination?
Absolutely. I'm positive of that.
Tell us about the encounter as a teenager, because that was much more vivid. Obviously, it left a lasting memory. Tell us about that encounter.
I was driving home. I had a Triumph Spitfire, which was a foreign car at the time, and it's only a bucket seat. It's only 2-passenger, and I was stopping at a 4-way traffic signal, Long Island, New York, and suddenly I just felt that there was a presence up above, and the light was red, and I look out underneath from my window looking up, and I see this giant UFO standing there, the typical saucer-shaped UFO. And my heart starts pounding from here out to there. And I say to myself, you're not seeing what you think you're seeing. And this was in the 1960s. I was not a drinker. I never took drugs. I never smoked. I'm a very dull person in all those areas. And so I knew that I wasn't hallucinating. I didn't have some source to see this.
Were you terrified?
I was very frightened. I wouldn't say I was terrified until I suddenly realized that the lights went on. At first it was very dark, but I could see the shape of it because it was above a street light. This was a residential area, so I was thinking that someone surely should see this and I should hear something about it on the news next day, but which I never did.
Did this go on then for you with some further or closer interaction with the people who were, or the beings who were aboard this vessel?
Yes, at the time I didn't realize that I had been on board, and it was later on uncovering information that I found out I actually did go on board with these beings, and there were other people that were on board there as well.
Other humans?
Other humans that had been taken on board.
You know, you mentioned that one of them was a woman. You remember that from when you were a child, and you brought along some sketches. Do the aliens look different every time?
I have seen
I'll just be holding these up to the camera if we can see them at all.
The last one is not a picture, though.
Right, okay.
This particular being was an incident that I recently had within the past 2 years, which was a very warm, loving incident. This is one of my clients as a hypnotherapist has seen that. That is a lizard type. This was a very frightening experience, one of the rare few. This was actual bone structure around the eyes. The eyes had pupils, but you see they're different from the normal.
Didn't you see large, 6 foot tall?
I saw a 6 foot tall being, which was tan in color. I've seen ant-like beings, which were 3 feet or under in size. I would sometimes see them what I would call interdimensionally, because I would see them as silhouettes, and then I wouldn't remember the others.
What do you remember about personalities, or were you around them long enough to get an impression?
When different beings would come in, you would get a different sensation as to whether you should be fearful or not fearful. There were many times in my life that I was absolutely so terrified that I thought I was going to die before anything might even happen.
But you got these feelings with communication or because of communication, and what form would that communication take?
Their communication comes through their eyes. They talk to you through their eyes, for me at any rate. Some people hear communication as if they're talking telepathy.
Yeah, we've got some more people. We'll ask them how they communicate. That's interesting. I would have
But
thought it
with
was
me,
the
it's
same.
mostly through the eyes, all the emotions, all the understanding. And so with that in mind, when I had one incident which actually woke me up, I heard my name shouted in my head and woke me out of a sound sleep. And I saw a face. It wasn't the whole being. All I saw was a face. And this was a very frightening face. It had folds in the skin, and it had huge, large, black almond-shaped eyes, and they were like black liquid.
We've got to take a break right here. Sharon is not alone in her experiences. Up next, a man who says his childhood home became a UFO landing strip. Plus, a Harvard psychiatrist who believes aliens can abduct you.
So if someone walked up to you and claimed to have been abducted by an alien being, how would you react? Think twice before you answer that question as you watch the rest of our program today. We have a phone caller on the line. Go ahead, you're on the air.
Hi,
Hi.
My name's Cammie from Silverdale.
Hi.
And my question is, couldn't all these sightings and abductions and things, couldn't they be like a product of America's collective overactive imagination?
That's got to be a very common question, and I'll address it to Dr. John Mack, who has joined us on set. You must hear that question a lot, Dr. Mack.
It's kind of the reverse of the usual kind of question, because we're a culture that's addicted to not believing in anything except what we can take pictures of, or what's reported to police stations, or what you can handle physically. And the sightings are physical. I mean, they are the physical evidence, or one of the forms of it. And there are just so many objectively covered sightings in all of the media. And it seems to me that if we deny our own media, they become our eyes and ears, then what are we to trust as having some reality in the external world?
But tell us how you felt before you began working on this book, and before you began working with these experiencers, as you call them.
Yeah, I mean, when I first heard about this phenomenon, and particularly about Bud Hopkins, the pioneer who investigated them most comprehensively initially in New York, I thought, you know, this man must be out of his mind, and this must be some new form of mental illness. And the colleague that brought me to see him said, no, it's real. It's something important going on here. So I reluctantly went to see him, and what I discovered from talking with him, and then more significantly with the 90 people that I've worked with since that time, was something that has created a powerful mystery for me.
You've done a complete turnabout in your thinking.
I'm wondering if, Dave, if you thought you were losing your mind when you spotted your first alien.
Well, of course. I mean, the ironic thing is, you know, I'm 43 years old now, and 2.5 years ago, coming to the reality of what really happened to me back as a child and through my teenage years.
You were 6 years old the first time in
6 years old.
Springfield, Missouri, on a farm. What happened? What do you remember?
Well, what I remember at that time was I was playing on the back porch with my sister. I have an older sister who's 2 years older than I am. And my father, it was a dairy farm, and my father had finished milking the cows, and he was coming up from the barn to the house, and I had gone off the porch out to greet him. And as I went off of the porch, I turned to my right where the back of the house was, and I saw a horrifying face on the wall. And I remember I immediately turned to my dad because I wanted to see if he saw it. There was no response from him, but then when I turned back to the face, it was like the eyes of this thing on the wall just penetrated me. I was paralyzed. And then the next thing I remember was turning back to my father, and he was kind of, he was startled, and I was frightened, and he would ask me, "What are you scared of?" And he's kind of, you know, laughing a little bit, and I said, "Well, Dad, did you see the face on the wall?" And he said, "No, I don't see anything." I said, "Well, somebody was there with a Halloween mask or something." And he said, "I didn't see a thing." Then the next thing I remember, we went into the house, and then my dad made the comment that, well, you know, it took a lot longer to milk this evening than normal, but I started the regular time, and he couldn't figure out where the time went. There was like 30 to 35 minutes of time lapsed.
Doris in our audience has a comment. Doris?
Yes, I was in the Air Force in 1952, and I was with the Strategic Air Command, and where we, in a very secure building, where we tracked all of the planes that were in the area. And the radar trackers there would literally call out UFO, and they would track something, and then it would just suddenly, you know, when it disappeared, it disappeared. They would be sometimes singly, sometimes there would be clusters of them.
Did they comment on the speeds, Doris, at which they track these things? Because that's been one of the unique parts of this phenomenon, is these things are capable of incredible speeds.
Well, the radar trackers, all they ever did was call out UFO. And then we would watch them, and we would see them move the little figures that they used to indicate either a plane or whatever, in this case, what they called a UFO. But to this date, the Air Force, to my knowledge, does not acknowledge that they have ever tracked them.
One of the eerier things I've heard is what happened to you just a few months ago with what happened in your mouth. Tell us all about that.
Yeah, it's kind of a gory thing. I mean, I'm not going to get into the gory parts of it, but you know, but it was frightening. It was very frightening to me. I went out with a friend of mine early in the morning. We played 9 holes of golf. I came back in to get cleaned up, and for the last 3 days, I had this piece of skin in my mouth that I'd been messing with my tongue, and I noticed that it was a white piece of skin across the bottom of my mouth. And my mouth was a little sore, but I didn't pay that much attention to it. So what I did, I took a pair of tweezers, and I just pulled a piece of skin that was loose, and it came open. And I mean, it really came. I'm not going to get into the whole gory part of it, but it came open. I got the bleeding stopped. I went right to my office. I told the people in the office I had called and made an appointment with my physician, who's an internist. I showed it to a couple of the people in the office. It was really bad. And then I went to the doctor's office. He looked at it. And the first thing he asked me, he said, "Have you had mouth surgery recently?" And I said, "No, not at all." And he said, "Well, it's cut, and it's been cut very precise with a very sharp..."
Like with a surgical instrument.
Right, like with a surgical instrument. And I'll never forget this. He took his bifocals off. He sat down on the bench. He says, "Well, then I don't know what happened." And I tell you, for me to inflict injury on myself, I've been through C-sections with my children and passing out. I see a needle, I pass out. I see blood, I pass out. I was having a hard time dealing with this.
So what do you think it was?
Well, the next thing I knew, 5 days later, the skin graft was back over it again, and in 3 days it healed up. But I went back through another regression to find out, you know, I had to find out what happened. And during that regression, the tall aliens came in, cut my mouth open, and they took a small gray cylinder-like type of device out of my mouth. And there's a place there down next to my jaw inside my mouth that had always been there. It's been there for, I remember when I was in my 20s, I had a dentist look at it. He said it's just part of the bone, but it's not part of the bone, it's gone.
We'll take a short break. John Mack has also asked about physical evidence a great deal. We'll talk more about that when we come back. Also, we'll localize it. Are aliens making contact with people here in the Northwest? We'll hear one woman's encounter that took place right on Interstate 5. We'll be back.
Dave was just telling us how he believes aliens implanted something in his mouth and then maybe took it out. But this was not so unusual. From reading your book, it sounds like there are a lot of surgical implants being performed.
Yes, this may be one of the more dramatic examples, but case after case, the person will remember in hypnosis or without hypnosis that some kind of device was placed in their nose or in the vagina or in the penis in case of one man. And they feel that they've been tagged, much the way we tag animals in a herd when we want to be able to track them. It's the experience is that they are doing this so they can be found again, and sometimes they will abduct the person, remove the implant as occurred in this example Dave gave, put in another device, but the idea behind this appears to be some way to monitor or keep track of the people that they're working with.
Because they don't just have one encounter, it seems like they have them over and over and over then throughout their life.
Mm-hmm.
Cindy in our audience had an encounter when you were on I-5 near Mount Vernon, and something a little bit weird happened. Tell us about that.
Well, I was actually on my way home at night, about 11 o'clock at night. I had been visiting my mother, who had a cerebral hemorrhage. She had cancer that was exacerbated. And I was about 10 miles south of Mount Vernon when I noticed this object that was about to the right of the freeway, approximately 50 to 60 feet above the ground, and I could tell because of the treetop level. Most firs are anywhere from 50 to 75 feet tall. And I was observing the shape of the craft, the size of the craft, and the lights that were moving sequentially in a circular sequential motion around this craft, and I thought that was very unusual. And the closer I got to it, I was eliminating things that it could be. First, I thought it could be a dirigible. Well, I had my window down. It was a quiet, calm night, and the closer I got to it, I couldn't hear anything. It was totally silent. Then I knew it couldn't be an airplane.
Couldn't be a helicopter.
Well, that was my last alternative.
So didn't you stop the car?
I was trying to. The closer I got to it, I realized it wasn't a helicopter either, but the size of the craft appeared to be that of a Chinook helicopter, although it was a little bit larger. At that point, I realized it was not a craft that we had designed. I just knew that it wasn't.
That humans had designed.
Correct. And the lights that were moving around it, and as I came upon it, I realized it was a sphere. So I made the conscious decision to pull over, and I am very conscious of my body position when I'm driving. I knew exactly what position I was in as I was getting ready to pull off the freeway to get out and look at this thing. It's as if, it's hard to explain. 1 second later, I'm 10 miles down the road and I'm driving in a totally different position. And I verbally spoke to myself out loud. That was interesting.
Let's take a phone call. Go ahead, caller.
Hi, I was wondering, why do you think they never reveal themselves to everybody instead of just one person at a time?
Dr. Mack?
Now, this question comes up often. What is alien motivation and intention? And that's what we know the least about. The question presumes that in some way we accept the reality of it, and I think as we accept the reality of this phenomenon, whatever that means, in other words, whether it's from some other dimension entering our dimension, but something important is going on here, and we open to it, I believe that they will become less subtle. Right now, they fear us. We attack them when they show up. We are frightened of them. We try to, experiences actually swing their fists at them, try to knock them down. So they're worried about us. They paralyze us because they're doing things that are distressing to us, and then we, in turn, understandably, react with fear and aggression. So as we begin to open our spirits or open our souls to whatever reality this is, and when that happens with the people that I work with, they become less aggressive, they show up more powerfully, and maybe at some point they will allow themselves to be better known to us. But right now, they feel, or whatever this is, their intention is, I don't know, but they enter our world in a subtle way. They don't make themselves fully manifest. And I don't know why that is, except what I said.
Travis in the audience with a question or comment. Go ahead.
Why do you believe people are being abducted by aliens?
Well, again, that's kind of like the last question.
Purpose and intent, yeah.
I don't know the purpose. I know what the basic structure of the experience is, which has three parts to it. It has this breeding program, which appears like a joining of our species, which is very densely embodied, and the alien species, which is much less densely embodied, which seems to be a very difficult project because the hybrids don't seem to be very vigorous. So that's one thing. Second is there is some kind of information exchange going on. They are conveying to us on monitors and telepathically that the destruction we are wreaking upon the Earth is causing damage that is affecting the cosmos, is not just an Earth-level damage. And the third dimension is, in some way, this is opening the experiences, people like Dave and Cindy and Sharon, to a higher dimension, a higher sense of themselves. Some kind of spiritual opening, evolutionary processes occurring. So those seem to be the three effects of what they do. But whether that's their intention or not, I'm not sure.
We've got to break away for a moment. Are aliens our enemies or are they our friends? We'll find out when we come back.
I understand Cindy Crawford just called a moment ago.
Right.
We keep coming back to the question of intent with the alien abduction phenomenon, and I wonder, Sharon, if it ever became clear to you what the purpose was for the contact that you had from alien beings.
Actually, I think I have partial answers to that. My thoughts in the beginning were that I was being a victim, I was being violated, and things had turned around for me. With saying that I saw 6 different types, we didn't get into a lot of the details.
Right.
And as I grew older, I was being given information back to me rather than something taken from me.
What kind of information?
It's a learning of what you are to do in this world, how you are to help others, how you are to help the planet, what needs to be done. And as Dr. Mack said, it's a spiritual thing as well.
So they're not our enemies.
That's not to say that all of them are like that.
Yeah, I rather than soap opera, I've been accused of getting on a soapbox around this, and so I have to be a little careful with myself here. But my sense is that something, and stay with me here, something in the individuals can be paralleled in the culture. In other words, as the individuals go deeper into their own experience, acknowledge that it has some truth, even though it's a mystery, they don't know what it is, some kind of spiritual opening, some kind of expansion of the sense of self occurs, which is constructive, creative. And I think we could maybe do that in the culture. In other words, if we could just get beyond this, are they here, are they good, we're scared of them, what are they doing, let's shoot the messenger that tells us they exist, let's deny the whole thing. And
Didn't you have to do that to write the book?
Yes, if I went through this too, and I think we could as a culture maybe, if we could acknowledge that maybe there are other intelligences out there. They may not take the form that we were taught in Sunday school, but maybe if we could admit there is some intelligence, that we are living in a universe that is not dead and lifeless, except on Sundays, but actually contains beings and spirits that all other cultures around the world know and have known, and our culture knew it until 300 years ago, that if we could admit that reality, maybe we could open to some kind of deeper experience of our own, learn to live in harmony more fully with other life forms here, and maybe some growth as a collective could take place, you know?
Do you feel positive about your encounters?
Oh, I feel very positive. I feel like for my own inner self, it has developed me to bring out all my talents, my ability to do what I do as a human being. And one thing I've learned through all the experiences is, as you get up every day, the universe has gone forward. If you're going to stay stuck, that's your problem. I'm not going to stay stuck in this problem. I'm going forward. The reason I'm speaking out is because I've met other people that's had this experience. They're shut down. They're shut inside. They've got to come out. For myself, it's very positive.
It's like one great quote that even if you're on the right track, you're going to get run over if you just sit there. It still takes some risk for people like you to come out and talk about these things, because there's the risk of just being labeled a nut or a lunatic. There had to be great risk for you, Dr. Mack, in writing the book among your professional colleagues, and I wish we had more time to
Can I say one thing? When you take a risk, other people take risks too, like Dave and Sharon and you two for having us on here. So, you know, you're risking something as well.
Thanks for joining us today. Cindy, thank you. We'll be back after this break.
Welcome back to our phone-in, which is about encounters with aliens, which may sound weird, but we've based it on this new book by John Mack, who is the professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School. It's called Abduction, and it's worth repeating. We said this at the beginning of the show, John. Someone who started off as a skeptic, you're a Pulitzer Prize winner and all the rest of it, have actually been convinced that the people you interviewed at great length and talked to you about their encounters with aliens, that they were actually telling the truth. There is something out there trying to contact
There's some
us.
kind of authentic mystery here, which my training in psychiatry just hasn't prepared me for.
Because as a psychiatrist, you would be able, first of all, to identify certain psychotic states, certain mental states, and therefore dismiss the stories as being a result of that. And two, you would also, with all the skill that you have, I mean, you're a top American psychiatrist at Harvard, you would be able to tell when people were telling fibs.
That's what I'm supposed to be trained to do, is to distinguish between fantasy, dream, psychosis, or authentic experience. And this has all the marks of authentic experience.
Because even if only some were lying, you would see an underlying pattern, wouldn't you, of either lies or mental disturbance. And the underlying pattern is people telling the truth.
Right, and these people don't want this to be true. I mean, they sometimes will come to me and want me to make it go away and give them a pill. And when they find other people are having the same experiences, they become shocked and tremble, and it freaks them out.
They really want you to explain it away, and in fact you can't. All right, we've had hundreds of calls, and all recounting similar experiences. We'll kick off with Ros from Essex. Good morning, Ros.
Good morning.
Good morning. Something happened to you in 1983.
That's right, yes. Me and my boyfriend was driving along, and the car actually stopped. It was stopped by this UFO. I was taken aboard the thing.
Hang on, getting a bit too fast. How do you mean it was stopped? Do you mean something came in front of the car?
No, the car actually just conked out. The lights went out. It just ground to a halt. It had all the... It felt like it'd run out of petrol or something.
Yeah, and you were taken aboard?
I was taken aboard the ship. They told me that by telepathy that their world and their race is dying, and they need to find other genetic material, and would I mind helping them with their experiments.
It's like Bob a Job Week, isn't it? You know.
To which you said, thank you very much, but can I go home, please?
Basically, yes, I did.
So what happened to you?
They did various experiments, and the upshot at the end of it is that I can't have children anymore, and it's completely ruined my life. I spent 10 years trying to prove that it was not, and it did not happen. I went to doctors, I got medical things, I eventually found out about a UFO society. In those days it didn't exist, you weren't allowed to talk about this kind of thing.
What did they look like, Ros?
They were about 3'6", very large heads, very large eyes, slit for a nose, slit for a mouth, no ears.
Were you terrified?
I was absolutely petrified, yes. And it was a case of whether I liked it or not, they were going to do this. And I lost 2.5 hours out of my life, and I spent 10 years trying to get it back.
Is this part of the experiences in your book, that people can actually find themselves genuinely traumatised, and in some cases physically, severely traumatised by an experience
This is very common that they are traumatized in this way. The whole story is a very familiar one, and it's this dense pattern of familiar experiences over and over and over again that convinced me that there was something powerful going on here. I wanted to ask her, Rose, did you have, was there anything about ourselves that the beings communicated to you? They talked about their own race, but what about us? Was there any information about us?
Yes, we are going exactly the same way as they are. Our planet.
So what was did they tell you anything about the point of the two species coming together like this?
Yes, basically if they combine the two, then both species can continue as one.
You see, that's a very important point, because people, what are they up to, or what are we doing, or it's about us. What she's saying is that this is some connecting. We don't know who's managing this whole show anyway. I mean, who are the handlers for both of us, you know? But it is a bringing together which is serving perhaps the needs of both species in some evolutionary way.
What always bothers me, though, about stories like Ros's are two things. One, culturally, we've all seen E.T. We've all seen Close Encounters, and Close Encounters has the famous scene where the car stops, you know? So we all have that kind of access to that imagery. and it's very common. And yet, Steven Spielberg, when he wrote the film, did not claim that he had personally had that experience. And the second thing is this business of the two races coming together. That's informed science fiction writing for generations,
Yeah, but
certainly for decades.
what you have to understand that the process can go in the other direction. In other words, what Steven Spielberg did was to contact Alan Hynek, who was in charge of UFO research in the United States, to get the details of what we were already learning about this, and then he popularized
So
it.
light is informing art.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Ross, but actually, I mean, never mind these two species coming together, they obviously, you feel that they obviously hurt you. What happened to your boyfriend?
They never touched him.
Was he aware of something happening?
No, he didn't. Neither of us were aware of anything happening until we actually reached our destination and found we were 2 hours missing. It was after that I started remembering.
Did you go into hypnosis?
We tried that, but unfortunately the poor people that tried to hypnotise us, the room just, there was a blinding light turned up, all the cameras went blank, the poor person was pinned into his seats and all the clocks stopped, so they had to cancel it.
Actually, I have to say that there's the things like clock stopping and things.
Well, that's one of the problems here is that, I mean, we're just beginning to develop a clinical tradition. I mean, these mental health professionals, for example, in Britain, don't accept this, so they don't learn to do hypnosis with this type of case. And it's in the underground, the grapevine, these cases avoid mental health psychiatrists and other mental health professionals because they don't accept it and they put them into pigeonholes instead of kind of taking it for what it is, for whatever that is.
Right, okay.
All right, Ross, thank you for calling. I'm going to move on to Maria from Kent. It's an extraordinary story. Now, obviously, this is all about, this whole phone-in is about aliens. You weren't aware of what happened to you, though, until you went into hypnosis.
Well, no, it's not strictly true. I did have some immediate recollection because I actually had some physical injuries to my body 2 days later that actually sent me scurrying to the local casualty unit.
All right, just tell us what actually happened as far as you're concerned.
Well, I woke at about 3:15 in the morning. I had a very strange compulsion to leave my bed. The room was filled with very bright blue-white light. And I can remember being told, you know, not to be afraid, you know, like a sort of voice in my head telling me not to be afraid. And there was all this light in the house, and I can actually remember walking down my stairs feeling very sort of almost paralyzed, not just of the body but of the mind as well, without any sort of conscious action on my part. I'm feeling really terrified by that. And actually, at one point when I reached the foot of our stairs, I was actually, I don't know how, I can't explain this logically, but I actually went through the front door. I was floated up through the solid front door, up into what appeared to be a column of light, and I can actually remember seeing my house and my garden and that disappearing below me.
All right. Can you tell us what these beings, what they actually did to you? The injuries that you say you got?
Yes. At one point I had some hair removed from the back of my head, which left a perfect circular mark where the hair had been taken out, not just by the root, it was just gone as if it had never ever been there. I had a needle at one point placed into the back of my head behind my ear, and I had another one placed up my nose, which actually caused my nose to bleed following the experience. And I had 7 little pinpricks on the little finger of my left hand.
Maria, what were they like? What do they look? I was asking what I asked Roz. What do they look like to you?
They were about 3.5 to 4 feet tall, a sort of tan grey colour, very big eyes. They looked like undeveloped children in that their bodies were very sort of skinny, and they moved quite sort of rigidly. They shuffled rather than sort of walked. And I did notice a peculiar smell, like a sort of rotting vegetation smell.
John's nodding away here. This is
every one of these details I've heard in many, many cases. You see, each person brings out many subtle details that simply are not in the media, and that's what gives this thing its robust quality. And much of this remembered without hypnosis. You feel, well, hypnosis isn't accurate or something like that. But much of the texture of this comes out just from recall like this.
So we seem to be, according to you then, what we're hearing is a common description of another species of life, which is about 3.5 feet high,
That's the most common
grey
one.
and waddles with big eyes.
Well,
really, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and then these complex, detailed things, which do vary to some degree, but there is this kind of robust texture of the experience, which is simply deepens and becomes more elaborate, and details keep coming that simply are not in the media.
Well, they don't sound very pleasant. I mean, what on earth were they doing to Maria? Is this sort of medical experimentation? Is that something which comes out again and again?
Well, again, when you work with the individuals, you find out more about what this is about, what was done. There's a strong reproductive, as we heard in the first case, reproductive aspect of sometimes they're hybrid children that are the product of the connection between the humans and the aliens. They're taken to see these hybrid children. This is a whole other race is being created. Sometimes there are profound spiritual experiences that people undergo when they go through that dark night of the soul, that terror. It becomes a whole nother realm of experience of opening to the light, that the light becomes a divine light. So there's another dimension, but people have to go through this traumatic period before they get to that other level. This next call, David, I think, is a very interesting one.
All right, thank you very much for that, Maria. And David, who's 34, calling from Tyne and Wear. Morning, David.
Good morning.
Hi, tell us about it.
Well, I just had these experiences in the early 1970s when I was about 12 and 13. We were living in Wiltshire at the time, and I used to go off for walks into the fields on my own quite a lot. And one field in particular, just outside the village where we were living, I would always, entering this field, feel sleepy and fall asleep. And during this sleep, I would have these very vivid dreams about a light coming down into the field, and I would go into the light and meet all these beings, which were, I can only describe like the previous lady described them, about 4 feet high, like children like myself, because I was looking at I was about 4 foot odd myself at the time, and they were on about the same sort of level as me. And then I would wake up in this field and, you know, go about my business. And it was never a bad experience, though. They would, I would always go back to this field to experience these feelings again and see these people again. I regarded them like as friends.
Have you ever been back, David?
I went, actually, for the first time in about 20 years last year.
Did it happen to you again?
No, I not at all. I just remembered, it was last year that I saw the film Intruders, which brought back a lot of the memories for me, which I'd sort of buried, if you like, really. It was this film which brought them back to me and made me start wondering about them. And indeed, the memories became flooding back to me because of this film.
Which village was it, David?
Uphaven village in Wiltshire.
Which village?
Uphaven.
Uphaven.
Uphaven, yeah. It's my father was actually stationed at RAF Uphaven, and it was the first time that he'd rented accommodation outside of the RAF in the village there. And
strange things in Wiltshire.
There was a lot of strange things going on.
David, could you describe the quality of the dreams? Were they different from like ordinary dreams?
Oh, absolutely, yes. The fact that I would always go purposely to this field to fall into this sleep to have these dreams wasn't the run-of-the-mill thing anyway. The dreams were very, very vivid. I always felt safe in them, though. I never felt threatened. Although I did feel that I was being examined. That was the feeling, that I was taken into this light. And these beings around me, you know, with the large eyes and small bodies, and very pale skins as well. They were examining me. I had the only way I can describe it is like a CD disc. One of them had this disc in their hand and threaded it into my head. Now, I didn't have any scars or anything like that, but I know that it went into my head. And
we have to wrap this because we're out of time, but you say that's common as well.
Yes, the sense of something being threaded into the brain, the mind change, biochemical changes in the brain, implants put in, and so much remembered by him consciously. He's had no hypnosis at all. He said he's considering doing hypnosis. So the whole notion that hypnosis is doing this is just ridiculous when you hear a story like this.
Well, there are many, many more stories. They all seem to be pointing in the same direction. In your book, Abduction, Human Encounters with Aliens, Johnny Mack.
Well, I don't want to meet any. They sound horrible.
In a sentence, is there any evidence that people can conjure up these things, i.e. people watching and think, oh, I'll have a go at that? You can call them down to you.
It's the last thing in the world they would want to conjure up. They're terrified by this. I mean, this is, it's a club no one wants to belong to.
All right. Well, listen, thank you for your calls.
Thank you, John.
Thank you very much indeed, John. We found that fascinating. Sorry we didn't have time
Thank
to
you
get a few
both
more
for
calls.
having me on.
Thank you.
It's a great pleasure.